Here we are then, another WCW pay-per-view and another WCW event headlined by Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair. Uncensored 99 took place on the 14th of March from Louisville, Kentucky. It brought in around 16,000 fans to the arena, and an estimated 325,000 fans bought the show on pay-per-view, down significantly from SuperBrawl IX, but still a good number. There's been some big changes made to the Hogan vs Flair match as announced by the commentary team at the start of the show. It's now a first blood match. The two are still going to fight in a barbed wire steel cage, but the first man to bleed loses the match. And on top of that, if Ric Flair loses, he must retire. If he wins, Flair can remain WCW president forever. The retirement stipulation was announced this past week on Thunder, however the first blood stipulation was first mentioned at the beginning of this pay-per-view. We have a very interesting match to open up Uncensored, Billy Kidman versus a debuting Mikey Whipwreck. Mikey came over from ECW and he's getting a shot at the Cruiserweight title in his debut match, no pressure at all. Whipwreck gets the better of Kidman at the opening bell with a front headlock followed by a quick head scissor takedown. Kidman looks a little surprised here and he might have underestimated Mikey heading into this match. The next exchange ends with a Billy Kidman dropkick that sends Mikey to the outside, and Kidman launches his opponent into the guardrail before coming back in with a flying crossbody. They are giving it their all here in the early going. It doesn't take long for the match to go back outside where Mikey drops Kidman on the guardrail. This looked really good. And back in the ring, Whipwreck brings it down to the mat with a modified deathlock. Mikey takes a page out of Kidman's playbook with a slingshot leg drop. The crowd then start cheering for Billy. Kidman finally fights back with a big clothesline, but he gets his momentum stopped again with a powerbomb counter from Whipwreck. Mikey's been super impressive so far, and he continues to impress when he abuses the chin of Billy Kidman on the mat. We then go back to the outside when Kidman performs a clothesline and Billy follows this up with a springboard crossbody that made the crowd go crazy. Back in the ring, Kidman counters a slingshot suplex with a DDT, but when Kidman goes for the shooting star, he gets pushed off the top rope, and again both men end up on the outside when Whipwreck misses an aerial attack and he smacks his face off the guardrail. The two have a brief scuffle in the crowd and it ends with Billy coming out on top, though at the ringside area Whipwreck pulls off a drop toe hold and Kidman smashes his head on the ring steps. I'm starting to think that Mikey could actually become Cruiserweight champion right here. Kidman tries to fire up again, but he misses a stinger splash. Mikey takes his eyes off his opponent for just a second and he nearly gets caught out with a schoolboy pin. Billy's able to hit the BK bomb after a little more back and forth, but he goes down after a neckbreaker and Mikey heads to the top rope. Kidman tries to bring Mikey down, but Whipwreck performs a diving clothesline that only gets him a 2. The match ends with Billy hitting a double underhook facebuster. Whipwreck replies with a top rope back suplex. We then see a curtain call from young Mikey, but it's not enough to put Kidman away. Billy counters a powerbomb with a facebuster, as is tradition, and the shooting star press ensures Billy Kidman leaves Uncensored with his Cruiserweight title. A good opening match at Uncensored 99 and a very impressive debut from Mikey Whipwreck. Unfortunately, his run doesn't last too long, but we will see Mikey make another few WCW pay-per-view appearances in the near future. The NWO Elite have been stirring the pot a little within the NWO Black and White. The original NWO's like a punchline, seeing as it's all about the red and black now. Hogan told each individual member of the Black and White that they're the leader of the group, and this would naturally lead to turmoil within the B team. That turmoil comes to a head at Uncensored with a Vincent vs Stevie Ray matchup, and no one really cares. Purposely sabotaging and watering down a very successful brand seems absolutely insane, but we're now in that era of WCW where nothing makes sense. The decisions this company continue to make are as confusing as they are frustrating. This match was not good. It was actually pretty horrible. It doesn't take long for the men to fight in the audience, and they struggle to keep their footing when brawling at an empty section of the arena. We then get some high-risk offense from Vincent that the crowd stay absolutely silent for, and look at the state of this. The old accidental headbutt to the bald spot never looked worse. It ends with Horace Hogan running down to throw Stevie's slapjack into the ring. He says he doesn't care who uses it because Horace is the leader of the NWO. I mean, okay. Vincent grabs the weapon, but Stevie hits him with his finisher, which is also confusingly named the slapjack, and Stevie Ray wins this match. Again, absolutely no one cared, and the fans had no one to cheer for. A terrible showing here from WCW. The next match has a lot more going for it. It's Rey Mysterio versus Kevin Nash. Since losing his mask at SuperBrawl, Rey's been on quite a winning streak, but he's not just beating cruiserweights like before, he's beating the biggest and baddest men WCW has to offer. In 3 weeks, he defeated Kevin Nash, Bam Bam Bigelow, and Scott Norton on Nitro, so Big Kev's out for revenge tonight, while Rey's gonna try to cement his name as WCW's official giant killer. I do get the feeling that Nash is going to win this one though. No favour goes unpaid in WCW when it comes to the big boys. Rey runs right into a big boot at the opening bell, so it's not starting well at all for Mysterio. Kevin Nash then launches his opponent into the air with a huge beel, but when Nash goes for it again, he ends up taking a bulldog. Rey then delivers a springboard leg drop, Nash falls out of the ring after a spinning wheel kick, and even though this is playing out just like the Mysterio vs Nash match that happened on Nitro, the crowd are still eating it up. Mysterio feigns a 619 before hitting a baseball slide. However, Nash is able to throw Rey into the guardrail and Mysterio's now in a bad spot. Kev performs snake eyes and Mysterio's head smacks off the apron. And back in the ring, Nash lays in a few knee strikes before setting Rey up on the top rope for a back elbow. Mysterio falls out of the ring and Rey needs a miracle at this point. It isn't looking good at all. Back in the ring, we see the biggest inverted atomic drop of all time and Nash seems pretty proud of his handiwork. But then Rey pulls off the move that ended Scott Norton on Nitro, a devastating kick to the balls. This gets followed up with a drop kick to the side of the head, and Rey's then able to hit a Bronco Buster. The comeback of the century ends though, and Nash grabs Mysterio out of a moonsault attempt. Rey does avoid taking snake eyes again, but he gets tripped up by Lex Luger and he then takes a big boot from Big Sexy. The jackknife powerbomb follows, Kevin Nash wins via pinfall, and while this was a match that got the crowd on their feet, I did think that the outcome was very, very predictable. Jerry Flynn's been getting the weirdest, most undeserved push in WCW history as of late, and tonight he's facing Ernest Miller and Sonny Onoo in a 2-on-1 match. Flynn seems super dejected as he walks down to the ring, and that's because Sonny Onoo cut off his ponytail this past week on Nitro. Jerry Flynn's a man without a mullet, and he seems really sad about this fact. The kid takes a few kicks in the corner before Jerry pulls off a spinning knife-edge chop. Flynn Balor means business here tonight. He then goes after Onoo for murdering his mullet, but this gives Miller a chance to strike, and clearly Mr. Onoo's in no rush to get involved in this match. Some karate capers result in Ernest Miller getting swept off his feet, and when Ernie goes to the outside, Flynn gets a chance to throw himself over the top rope. Miller and Onoo then remember they have a 2-on-1 advantage and Flynn takes a few kicks, and we see some more karate kicks when the match resumes inside the ropes. Gerald Flynn gets knocked out of the ring again and Sonny Onoo takes advantage. Again we get more kicks in the ring from Ernest, and Ernest has a chance to win it after knocking Flynn down with the feliner. Instead though, he tags Sonny in and Flynn kicks out at 2. Ernest and Flynn do a little more work outside the ring. Flynn gets thrown into the guardrail and he gets wiped out when chasing Onoo around the ring. The match comes to an end when Flynn throws Miller into Onoo and Onoo falls inside the ropes. Jerry pins Sonny and Jerry Flynn wins this 2-on-1 match. Another terrible bout here at Uncensored, and just like Stevie Ray versus Vincent, the fans had no one to cheer for. Why WCW were trying to push Jerry Flynn as a babyface is an absolute mystery. We have got Bam Bam Bigelow, Hack and Raven competing in a triple threat hardcore match. All three men claim to be the king of hardcore, so the argument gets settled tonight at Uncensored. Chastity comes to the ring with Raven. If you remember back to the Raven vignettes in January, Chastity's being portrayed as Raven's sister, and it doesn't take long for Chastity to head back up the ramp to fetch some toys for the boys to play with. Raven helps his sister throw weapons into the ring, and I guess this makes my job easier because all the guys are going to do now is smack each other around with trash cans, trash can lids, all that good stuff. The ring's filled up with crap, and when Raven tries to pull off a drop toe hold, Hack almost trips up over all the stuff lying around. To get a little payback, Hack whacks Raven with an ironing board. Bam Bam Bigelow uses a mailbox he finds lying on the canvas to do some damage to Raven. Raven repairs Bigelow with a low blow, and Hack almost trips up again when Raven sends him into the ironing board that was leaning up against the turnbuckles. It's an absolute mess here, and I don't really know what to say except they're beating each other up with weapons. No one's getting the upper hand here, everyone takes a turn at beating the other guys up, and the cycle continues until they've used most items lying around the ring. This even includes an oar that Raven decided to wedge in between Bam Bam Bigelow's legs, and Hack also gets an oar to the balls too for good measure. They change it up a little when Hack pulls off a top rope Hurricane Rana. He then goes to the outside to bring a table into the ring, but that table does not want to break. Hack gets powerbombed on top of the table and it doesn't give an inch. It does break, however, when Bam Bam performs what can only be described as a belly flop through the wood. Hack then begins using his weapon of choice, the Singapore cane, or the kendo stick. Chastity then gets in the ring to try and protect Raven, but Raven pushes her out of the way before getting whacked himself. And then Bam Bam Bigelow starts bringing more tables into the ring while Hack politely sets them up in their proper places. It's Bam Bam who gets sent through a table when he eventually gets back in the ring, and this gets followed up with Raven hitting an even flow on Hack. Raven then uses some tape to secure Hack's hands together, and in a spot similar to Rock vs Mankind at Royal Rumble 99, Sandman takes a few unprotected chair shots right to the head. Granted, there's a lot less chair shots here and the tape around Hack's wrists break pretty easily, but still it did remind me a little of Rock vs Foley. Raven gets some greetings from Asbury Park, Bigelow has it won, but he then decides to go upstairs for a moonsault, and this was a bad move. Chastity blasts Bigelow with a fire extinguisher and Bam Bam falls through a table, and then Chastity turns on Raven. Raven takes a blast from the fire extinguisher and this allows Hack to pin Raven for the victory. If you enjoy absolutely chaotic hardcore matches, then you'll probably get something out of this. There were a few good spots in the match and I'm sure the guys woke up feeling pretty sore after this bout. I'm not a massive fan of these kind of hardcore matches that have nothing but weapon shot after weapon shot, but that doesn't mean other people may not enjoy it. Your mileage may vary. Barry Windham and Curt Hennig defended their tag team titles next against Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko. Windham and Hennig won the championships at SuperBrawl. Chris and Dean got themselves a rematch, and this one's a lumberjack match. The lumberjacks are armed with straps. For some reason, every lumberjack has to be topless too. I have no idea what that's all about. Norman Smiley, Chris Adams, Prince Ikea, Hugh Morris, Ming and others serve as our lumberjacks. When the bell rings, Arn Anderson comes down the ringside and Chris Adams gives up his spot as a lumberjack so Anderson can join in. So the Horsemen have a little friendly backup standing at ringside. Curt and Windham decide they don't want to take part in this match. They try to leave, but the lumberjacks are right there to whip the shit out of the tag team champions. So Hennig gets in the ring, he slaps Chris Benoit, Benoit slaps Curt so hard that the former Mr. Perfect falls on his ass, and then the lumberjacks get another chance to whip Hennig. Curt doesn't learn his lesson and he tries to bail after a back elbow from Benoit, but he again gets attacked by the lumberjacks and so he decides to tag out. Barry Windham does not want to compete in this match, but he gets in the ring anyway and he takes a few chops from Benoit. Arn Anderson's quick to whip Mr. Windham when Barry falls out of the ring. Dino Machino comes in briefly to punish Windham before we go back to Curt and Benoit. Hennig thinks it's time for Benoit to take a bit of punishment and the boys on the outside of the ring are happy to oblige. When the match resumes, we see Curt and Chris share chops with each other before Chris ends up on the outside again. And after Chris gets whipped, Ming's got this look on his face as if to say, yeah, I really enjoyed that. Some chinlock action from Curt gets broken up with a back suplex. Big Barry Windham hits Chris with a stiff lariat before wiping Chris out with a standing dropkick. Malenko's desperate to tag in after Benoit nails Barry with a clothesline, but Curt tags in first and Benoit gets singled out for a little while longer. A German suplex gives Chris the break he's looking for and Stenko Malenko gets tagged back in. All four men brawl in the ring and Dean hits Curt with his own finisher, the Perfect Plex. Fortunately for the champs, Hennig kicks out, but then Dean applies a cloverleaf and Windham has to quickly save his partner. The boys on the outside want to do some more whipping and they get another opportunity when Dean falls out of the ring. However, Arn Anderson runs over to try and stop the other lumberjacks. That's not really fair, is it? This happens again a few moments later and the enforcer asks the other lumberjacks, "What's the matter with you guys?" And Arn, they're just doing their job. Calm down, mate. We build towards a Chris Benoit hot tag and when Benoit comes in, he cleans house. All four men get in the ring briefly and when Barry Windham falls out, his brother Kendall tries to protect him. I mean, this is fair, seeing as Arn Anderson's out here playing favourites, but Chris Benoit and the other lumberjacks don't see it this way. Meanwhile, in the ring, Curt gets himself a leather strap and he takes out Dean and Arn Anderson. But Anderson then gets inside the ring with his trusty tire iron, Arn with an iron. and Hennig gets taken out. This allows Benoit to go upstairs for a diving headbutt. He loses his footing and he doesn't get all the move, but it is enough to win the match and we have new tag team champions. The Horsemen finally have some gold and they might get a little more after tonight's main event. Not a great match if I'm honest. I thought it dragged on a bit just like their previous match at SuperBrawl. Our next match is a dog collar match, Chris Jericho versus Perry Saturn. The commentators are quite shocked at Saturn's appearance. He's been given new theme music, new arena lighting, he's now wearing coloured contact lenses, and his makeup game has definitely evolved. Jericho's a little freaked out too, and he decides that Ralphus should wrestle this match instead, and Ralphus is like, oh hell no pal. Jericho personal security doesn't get paid enough to wrestle dog collar matches, so Jericho tells Ralphus to beat it, but before he goes, he should give Chris his mouth guard. Ralphus is definitely a man who needs a mouth guard. Chris is reluctant to put the dog collar on. He tries to attack Saturn before strapping himself up, but Perry's ready for it, and Jericho gets suplexed. It's Saturn who ends up putting the collar on Chris, and Jericho forgets that he can't leave the ringside area while chained to his opponent. He tries to get a little comfort from referee Charles Robinson, but it doesn't get him very far. Perry steps on the chain before hitting Chris with a clothesline. Jericho then narrowly escapes, getting the chain smashed in his face, and after a tug of war, Jericho comes up short again when Saturn bounces over the top rope. Jericho gets rocked on the turnbuckle pads, and Chris takes a shot when Saturn jumps from the top. Perry then chokes his opponent out before punching Jericho in the face. The Ayatollah gets set up on the top rope and Saturn proceeds to pull Jericho out of the ring and onto the guardrail. Saturn proceeds to punish Chris on the outside as Jericho begins to wish he never showed up for this event. And back in the ring, Saturn picks up where he left off as he continues to choke Chris out. Jericho then gets a chance to go on offense after pulling the chain into Saturn's nutsack. More choking on the outside follows as Chris hangs his opponent over the top rope. Chris then tries to powerbomb Saturn on the ring apron, but Perry counters it, and Chris then takes a Hurricane Rana. Perry also counters a chokehold and he goes for a pin, but Chris kicks out at 2. Chris then goes to the top rope, but he gets pulled down again. Saturn makes Jericho pay by putting his dress over Chris's head for a few punches. Again, I can only imagine the smell in there. Our match ends with Jericho trying to apply the Lion Tamer while being all tied up. Saturn chokes Chris while the move's applied and Chris has no choice but to let go. Perry then performs his Death Valley driver, and just when you think it's all over, Chris kicks out at 2. So Saturn goes for a top rope Hurricane Rana, but this gets countered with a hard hitting powerbomb. Perry kicks out of the follow-up cover. So Chris takes the collar off Saturn's neck, he wraps the whole chain around himself, and Chris goes for a moonsault that Saturn was supposed to dodge, but Chris hits him anyway. This leads to another top rope move from Chris that Saturn does successfully dodge, and Perry wins the match following a second Death Valley driver. Not a bad match at all, a few little slip-ups, but I still thought it was pretty entertaining. I definitely think the Jericho vs Saturn rivalries ran its course though, and I'm hoping this is the end of their feud. Booker T vs Scott Steiner is our semi-main event. The TV title is on the line, and these two had a match on Nitro this past Monday that Scott Steiner won. Booker T was due a US title shot, but the champion, Scott Hall, is out with an injury, so Booker gets another shot at becoming a 6-time WCW Television champion. Scotty Steiner's been one of the most entertaining aspects of Monday Nitro recently, so it's good to see him get featured on pay-per-view. Loads of stalling from Big Papa Pump before the two lock up. Mickey J has a tough time breaking the competitors up, but it's Booker T who strikes first with an arm drag takedown. Mike Tenay says Booker T has Scott a little off his game tonight, it seems. Big Papa Pump comes back with a knee strike, and Booker goes down after a hard shoulder block. The challenger then wakes up and he goes for a spinning back kick, but the champ manages to get out of the ring. And Mike Tenay says again Booker has Scott where he wants him tonight. Big Papa Pump seems a little off. Scott complains to the referee that Booker has something in his glove. When Mickey J checks on Booker, Steiner gets in a cheap shot, but this still doesn't stop Booker from kicking Steiner in the head and getting in a few more punches. I mentioned on Reliving the War that Steiner dominated Booker on Nitro, but this time it looks like Booker's done his homework. Booker counters a suplex and Steiner takes a standing sidekick. An inverted atomic drop then gets followed up with a clothesline. Steiner takes a timeout and he tries to lure Booker out of the ring so he can gain an advantage when heading back inside the ropes. But this advantage is short-lived as Booker delivers another inverted atomic drop. Booker then covers Steiner after a flying crossbody, but Buff Bagwell pulls the challenger out of the ring and the two fight on the outside. The referee does not call for the bell here. Booker takes care of Buff, but the interference allows Scott to take control, and Booker ends up taking a ring step bump before getting thrown over the guardrail where Scott hits him with a steel chair. Back in the ring, Booker takes a Steiner line followed by an elbow drop. Buff Bagwell chokes Booker out from the outside and he decks him a few times when Booker falls out of the ring, and this gives Big Papa Pump the opportunity to deliver a gorilla press slam in the middle of the ring. Steiner then brings it to the mat looking for a submission victory, but Booker fights out and Steiner takes a kick to the face. The Harlem sidekick misses, however, and Buff Bagwell tries to choke Booker out with some cord, but he gets caught by the referee. Still, Booker's not out yet. We see his running forearm followed by a spinning back kick. The challenger then delivers the axe kick. Steiner then ducks a Harlem sidekick, and so does the referee. But Booker just tries again and Steiner gets wiped out. Just like the Nitro match, Buff stops Booker from going to the top rope and Steiner delivers a superplex. Scott then tells Buff to get in the ring and bring a steel chair while he's at it, but the plan backfires when Buff hits Steiner by accident and Booker kicks the chair into Bagwell's face. Booker pins Scotty Steiner and Booker T wins the television title. A dominant performance from Booker T right here, and the match wasn't bad either. Kinda sucks that some spots were copied from their Nitro match verbatim, but still a good match, and I don't really mind which guy came out on top either. There hasn't been many good things happening at this pay-per-view, but Booker vs Steiner is a match worth checking out. Hogan vs Flair's up next, a barbed wire steel cage match which is now also a first blood match. If Flair beats Hogan, he'll not only win the World Championship, but he'll be president of WCW forever. If he loses, he must retire. Hogan beat Flair last month at SuperBrawl, but Flair's booked himself in another match against Hollywood at Uncensored. The NWO Elite have brought in Ric's son to get under the Nature Boy's skin. However, this didn't work out too well, and Kevin Nash in particular was quite shocked that Flair pretty much no-sold the whole stunt, while remaining laser focused on winning the world title. Hogan, meanwhile, has called Ric Flair a rotten human being for putting the business before his family. Many people are speculating that Ric Flair's slowly losing his mind. Arn Anderson had a talk with his friend to see where his head's at. Goldberg told Flair to his face that he's losing it. Hogan and Nash are even a little taken back that Flair cares more about the world title than his own son, but we'll see how it all turns out when Uncensored comes to an end. The Nature Boy makes his entrance first and he tells Charles Robinson that this match is a first blood match. If Rick or Hogan get a little scratch or a little small cut, then the match must continue on. It can only end at the referee's discretion, so no stopping the match for incidental blood loss. Tony Schiavone says the rules are clear, the first man to bleed is the loser of the match, and I want you to keep that in mind as we take a look at this main event. Hogan's in the ring, the steel cage gets lowered, and it's even got its own entrance music just like the WCW War Games cage. It's time for Hollywood Hogan vs Nature Boy Ric Flair. Hogan controls the match early on by shoving Flair a few times. A side headlock from Hulk gets followed up with a shoulder block, and instantly it feels like Hogan's working babyface tonight. You can just tell with Hogan matches, and it's weird seeing as Hogan's WCW's #1 heel right now. Flair pokes Hogan in the eye, the champ gets chopped in the corner, Hogan replies with a back body drop, and we see a few clotheslines from Hollywood. The crowd seems split here too, there's fans cheering for Hulk and there's fans booing Hulk in Louisville tonight. Hogan body slams Flair, the Nature Boy takes 2 elbow drops, Hogan then chokes his opponent out, and this is more like the NWO Hogan we all know. The two then get in a chopping match in the corner and Hogan comes out on top. In the opposite corner, Flair takes a few punches to the head and we see the Flair flop after Rick takes a corner clothesline. Hogan then cups his ear and the fans give him a mixed reaction. Even Tony Schiavone says it's been a while since Hogan's done this, and it's so strange that Hulk's acting like a babyface here. There were hints of this back at SuperBrawl if you remember. Hogan then applies a figure 4, Flair makes it to the ropes and Hogan breaks the hold. Steel cage, barbed wire, first blood, and we've got fucking rope breaks. Ramming your opponent's head into the steel cage is absolutely fine though, as Flair finds out moments later, and after throwing a few mounted punches in the corner, Hogan decides to bite his opponent's forehead. Flair then tries to escape, but Hogan pulls down his tights and the Nature Boy's ass gets exposed. He must have had a little shit hanging out because someone in the crowd throws in some toilet paper. Now, have a look. Ric Flair has been busted open. The match should be over. That is not incidental. That, my friends, is a busted open nature boy. The referee does not end the match and the commentators are very confused about this. Just to make things even more confusing, Hogan pulls down some barbed wire and he sticks it in Flair's forehead. Tony Schiavone confirms with his colleagues that this was supposed to be a first blood match, and in the end the commentators just say, forget about it, it doesn't matter. So what the fuck's going on here? How can someone win this match? Is Charles Robinson screwing over Hulk Hogan or something? Hogan whips Flair with his weight belt before sending the challenger into the cage again. Flair gets his face grinded on the cage and he gets rammed into the cage over and over again. There's nothing incidental about the blood pouring out from Flair's head, and the commentators just accept that the match is going to continue. Hogan hits the big boot followed by the leg drop, and Charles Robinson won't count the pinfall. No one knows what's going on here, and even Hogan says Flair's been busted open and he's being pinned, but Robinson refuses to count the pinfall. Flair's got those brass knucks that don't look like brass knucks, but we'll call them brass knucks anyway. Hogan gets decked before getting sent into the cage. Now Hogan's been busted wide open and still the match continues on. How on earth are you supposed to win this thing? I know Flair said it's all at the referee's discretion, but do the competitors need to lose body parts or something? David Flair and Tori walk down the ringside and Flair spits on his own son while saying, I'm gonna be a 14-time champion. Rick is 100% the heel in this match, and if you need any more proof, we see Hogan hulk up after taking some punishment. Again, this was teased last month at SuperBrawl, but we get the full routine here and the crowd are now firmly behind the Hulkster. Rick takes a few punches, he takes another big boot, we see leg drop number 2, and Charles Robinson hesitates to count. Eventually, he does what he's paid to do, but Flair kicks out at 1, and after taking a suplex, Hogan gets to his feet with a glorious no-sell, and Flair is once again in trouble. Flair gets on his knees, he begs for mercy, but his call for forgiveness goes unanswered as Hogan drills him into the cage a few times. The match ends when Charles Robinson takes a bump and good guy Hogan decides to try and help the referee out. Flair hits a low blow, and this is Arn Anderson's cue to run down and take out David Flair. The crowd pop as David gets leveled, and Tori also gets dumped on the floor when she tries to defend her man. Arn then passes his tire iron to Slick Rick. Hogan gets knocked out, the Nature Boy applies the figure 4, and Charles Robinson has no problem counting the 1, 2, 3. Ric Flair is a 14-time world champion, and I don't know man, I smell shenanigans. It's pretty typical for Hogan to not lose world championships clean, we all know that, but this was such a confusing mess that it's hard to work out exactly what WCW were going for. All you can really think is Charles Robinson screwed Hogan. Obviously, we're looking at a Hogan babyface turn. It also looks like Rick might be turning heel, but they confused everyone here with this first blood rule, and the fact that the referee refused to count pinfalls makes the whole thing even more messy. A fascinating match for sure though. I wouldn't call it good, but it does kind of encapsulate the sheer chaos and confusion that was World Championship Wrestling in 1999. When all's said and done though, Ric Flair is the new world champion and he's now the permanent president of WCW. Uncensored 99 does not come recommended, the bad outweighs the good. Whipwreck vs Kidman was a great little opening bout. Every other match that I'd say was decent already took place either on episodes of Nitro leading up to Uncensored, or they happened recently on other pay-per-views, such as Saturn vs Jericho, Mysterio vs Nash, and Booker T vs Scott Steiner. The main event was a complete and utter mess, but I'd be lying if I didn't say a Hogan babyface turn doesn't at least sound interesting. He's made himself into WCW's biggest villain, and by the sound of things, it seems like the audience would be willing to cheer for Hogan if he ditched the NWO. There's always caveats when Hogan drops the belt though, and the match does have that usual Hollywood stench to it, but at least it's going to make Nitro interesting tomorrow night, I hope. Join me for Reliving the War next week and we'll see what happens. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe, and finally, take care.